What you're about to experience is one man's quest to see beyond the tumultuous period we're in and to envision what lies just beyond our grasp, yet well within our reach. Welcome to Larry Rifkin's America Trends, where the future has arrived, and it's just in time.
Welcome to America Trends. Today we will visit with one of the most interesting figures in the criminal justice realm in America. And criminal justice reform is trending all over the nation, from state capitals to Congress. Republicans and Democrats are saying we have to make major changes in policing, the court system, the prisons, the bail apparatus. None of it is working to make us safer. Larry Lawton, he's the co-author of Gangster Redemption. Larry has served hard time in America's prison system and came out to lead a life not only on the straight and narrow, but to help others avoid that which he experienced on the inside and to clean up the grime of the system itself. He's developed the leading program in America to help young people not go to prison, and he's the first ex-con to be sworn in as an honorary police officer and to be recognized on the floor of the U.S. Congress for his work helping young people and law enforcement agencies. What a fascinating story, Larry, that you have. And before we focus on changes that you recommend, tell us how you command this pretty unique position in the world of law and order.
Well, Larry, thanks for having me on your show again. And let me just explain that in a pretty quick way. When you say and tell it like it is, right, wrong, or indifference, people will respect that. Coming from a position of a man who made bad choices, lived the high life, and then went to prison and then was tortured in prison, strapped down naked, beaten, and tortured. Got my law degree. I can't be a lawyer. I have the credits to be a lawyer. And now you come out with different ways, and when you see things on both ends of the spectrum, there's no question you have a better take on things, Larry. And I think that's why I can command such knowledge of what I do and why people want to know. I came up with things, how to change the prison system, how to stop the abuses going on in there, how to help young people stay out of prison, and to continue helping law enforcement as well to keep our country safe, and also have our liberties as well.
Absolutely. Do you want to talk about how you ended up in prison, just to give people some sense of where you've come from, where you are today?
Sure, Larry. I grew up in the Bronx in Brooklyn, New York. I was 12 years old. I got associations with organized crime as a little kid, doing little crimes, from football tickets to mini robberies, nothing serious, but still stealing stuff and doing all the wrong things. I ended up trying to straighten my life out. I went into service. I enjoyed the service. I ended up getting hurt in the service, got out, had all my connections, and then I was back right with the mob. I was associated with the Gambino crime family. I ended up becoming the biggest jewel robber in the United States, robbing between $15 and $18 million. I went to prison and did not tell, and we'll get into that in a little bit because you have to keep a person's dignity. And after I did that, Larry, I got out of prison after serving 4 12-year sentences for Hobbs Act robbery, which is interfering with interstate commerce, which made it a federal crime under the RICO Act. So once I got out of prison, I developed the reality check program, which is now considered the #1 program in the country helping young people stay out of prison and helping law enforcement connect with the community. So what I've done is kind of interesting because there's nobody has been sworn in as an honorary police officer except myself in the United States to this day, and there's nobody ever recognized that they know on the floor of the House of Representatives in Congress as an ex-con as well for helping young people and helping law enforcement.
Well, we know that the entire system, from beginning to end, is being scrutinized. The reality check program, and then I want to get into some of the broader reforms that you're seeing and that you would advocate. But tell us a little bit about the reality check program.
Well, Larry, I got out of prison, and a friend comes up to me and says, "Hey, Larry, I need a favor." I said, "What the F? You want me to break somebody's leg or something?" He says, No, Larry, I caught my son smoking weed, and he told me, F you, Dad, where have you ever been? I said, "Your son told you that?" I ended up getting pictures together, talking to this young man for a few hours, not thinking anything of it, and just being very straight up with this young man. He was a 16-year-old young kid. And the dad called me up. He was a golf pro, and he called me up and he said, "Hey, Larry," he says, "I don't care what you do at law or whatever else you're going to do. You have to work with young people. My son needs help." And he said, "Dad, I don't want to go where Mr. Lawton went. I want help." And then I developed the program into an actual program, which now, Larry, is the only program, and it is used in court systems for sentences. Judges actually use it and sentence people every day to the reality check program, which is a 4-part program. It's done in one sitting, but it's 4 parts to it. It's my life, which relates to a kid or relates to anybody, because we work with young people, not just kids. What prison is really like, not what you see on TV, because what you see on TV is not true. Mm-hmm. Number 3, what you're going to lose. And that's my kids. I had a 15-month-old daughter when I went to prison, and I got out and she was 13. My son was 6. I got out, he was 18, and it hurts. And it's not about money. You lose everything that's important. And the 4th part of the program is avoiding and dissolving bad associations, which is really culminates to being the success it is. And people ask me every day, Larry, why is it so successful? And I tell them it's because I don't change the people, they change themselves. I show them what's going to happen to them in a very realistic way if they keep making the bad choices. So you have to bring your program or any program down to their level and then bring them up. And that goes for any programs, which we'll get into today, whether it's law enforcement or juveniles or even, like I said, misdemeanor offenders, which is what I, major part of what I do. I actually just testified in court yesterday for a young person, 20 years old, and they're trying to give him 50 years in prison. And it's no violence, nothing bad. I think we're going to do very well, and the sentencing will be tomorrow. And I'm actually testifying again tomorrow. I also testify in the juvenile life sentence cases, which the Supreme Court, under the Miller decision, mandated that anybody under the age of 18, a juvenile, has to be resentenced. And to get a life sentence, it's harder now for them, but they're still trying to get around that in some districts.
Well, I do want to talk about sentencing, but I'd like to start on the streets, and then we'll go into the courts, into the prisons, and we'll take a little bit of time with this. Let's start on the streets with the relationship between the citizens and the police. Lots has been written about this. What's been most distressing to you about all that's been reported and what you've seen over the recent period within the last couple of years?
Well, we have a problem right now, and it's really a communication gap. I have been traveling around the country working with some select police departments, and I say select because some are very hard-headed. The ways of the 80s of lock them up and throw the keys away is not the way it's going today, and it's not the way to do it. That has been proven to be wrong. It hurts families. It doesn't do anything to lower crime rates, and it's ruining lives all over. And police, there are police agencies to this day that are very hard-headed, whether it's they have, guys who've been in there for so long that they don't want to change, and you do get that, and they think the more arrests they make, the better they are. And in fact, if you show me a city with a high arrest rate, I'm going to show you a city that's not understanding policing and how to connect with the community. As one police chief told me, Larry, when I have no arrest and low crime rate, I know I'm doing a great job. If I have a high arrest rate, that means there's something wrong in my society and in my community. In why? Whether it's crime prevention, drug awareness. It could be a number of things that a good police department is going to do. Obviously, they work, a lot of police departments work with my program because we are the #1 community policing program, connecting the police with the community, Larry. So that is part of it. But what really disturbs me is when you have an us against them mentality, and you don't have either sides now, both sides, this goes for the civilian side as well, and the inner city communities or whatever, that you can do a lot for them, and it's still never enough, and that's wrong. And then you also have police departments that are, not willing to change and be community-minded. They want to buy tanks and more machine guns and whatever else you want to, they get from the military.
So the whole idea of community policing, I think virtually every police department, at least in name, is suggesting that they are committed to this. But how do you know that a police department really is engaged in community policing?
Great question, and you're right. A lot of them give it lip service. Oh, we have a community policing guy, and they assign a guy the name of community policing, and he might walk the street one day. Well, community policing is a feeling. It is a institution within the institution. It is a total commitment on the whole police department to be community-minded. To give you an example, one police department in South Florida, they have my video cards, and every single police officer in the department has them. And they might see a person at 12 o'clock at night in a store, or they might see somebody out on a weekend, whether they're in civilian clothes or not, Larry, and they give them these video cards when they see a person having difficulty, or even not, when they start a conversation and the person says, yeah, I have a 13-year-old driving me crazy. The police officer will pull out a card and said, here's the #1 program in the country helping kids. We support these because we're here to help you, and that's what our police department's for. That is a total commitment by the whole agency. And obviously in law enforcement, Larry, change comes from the top down, not from the bottom up like a lot of organizations. Change comes from the top down by way of the police chief and by the way of the senior officers in that department. So that is the difference with a department that is committed. You will see one will have a few officers that are on this team they call the community policing team. And quite frankly, Larry, it's BS. And I could tell within 30 minutes of being in that police department, asking a few questions of the random officers I talk to, and I will know right away what kind of level of community policing that department has.
We're talking about trends in the criminal justice system with Larry Lawton. Black Lives Matter, police unions, President Trump, conservative activists, they all see things they don't like on our streets today, even though the numbers in terms of crime are down. They were up just a little bit last year, but as a trend, they are down. Who has the best angle on what's happening out there?
Well, numbers are deceiving, Larry. In one way, drug overdoses and drug crimes are up. So obviously, yes, certain other crimes might be up, might be murder, but you could take a number of murders. It could be 10 murders, and the year before you had 8. Now they're saying there's a big increase in murders, and it could be one family. So numbers could be deceiving. I believe you really will know a community by how much, and believe it or not, the newspapers and the radio and all communication ways are very important with highlighting this. When you see newspapers talking about the gardens that are in the community, that means they're not talking about the criminals or the crime in that community, and that's a good sign. So don't discount the media. The media is part of the whole picture, whether they want to call it. It's not fake media, obviously, and the radio. And if you're talking about crime or if you're talking about stuff because it's happening, Larry, we know it's there. So you can't sugarcoat that and you can't hide that. And, crime is also a feeling. If you go to a community and people are very on edge about a lot of things and they know their neighbor got robbed and this buddy got robbed, that goes around the community quite quickly. And that is a feeling that is not supposed to happen in our communities, and we shouldn't have it. We have a small community in South Florida where the cops worry about tickets, and they've had a rape, I think 2 rapes now, in a very small community in a place where police should be patrolling, a park. So, we have to think about law enforcement in a couple of ways. How does the community that you serve as a law enforcement officer or a chief of police, how do they feel about your community? And don't go to the old lady who's the auxiliary cop who loves the police, whether you shoot somebody or not. You have to go to different segments of that community and really find out what they believe. And I'm not talking, and you're going to get negative on one end and you get positive on one end, no matter what they do. So you weed those out. You take the average person in the community, and that person, when you get them in the right situation, will tell you how they feel about their law enforcement. And when I talk to people, because it's a way you and who you talk to. If I want to hear about great police, and this is a great community, I go to a 6-year-old who thinks, the police can do no wrong, and you go to a 80-year-old who doesn't think the cops, remembers the old days with billy clubs. But you get the average working man who might have been harassed or coming home from a hard day work, and he's stopped for going 5 miles an hour over the limit, and the guy treats him badly. And that, I hear cases like that, and then I know that the department itself needs serious training, and that's a big part of it. And again, not everybody's made to be a police officer, Larry, so what we need to do is hire the right guys. And that is a big problem right now, because in today's society, not many people want to be a police officer.
All right, let's move on to sentencing. The big push, I know in the state in which I live and throughout the country, is raising the age of those sent to juvenile court from 18 to 21. And they say that the new brain research suggests that kids are kids for a longer period than we previously understood. And I'd love to get your impression of this, and yet there are others who say, well, when we look at those teenage boys, 18, 19, and 20, they're perpetrating a lot of the crimes. Do we really want to let them off too lightly, even in the face of this new research?
Well, that's a great question, and I deal with this every day. The brain every study shows the male brain doesn't mature until 25, and fully mature until 25, and the female approximately 23. Now, there's a great quote. If you have young people who are not committing violent crimes, there are crimes that we, and I say we, maybe my age group, I'm 55, or your age group, when we were younger people that would have never got arrested, going into a neighbor's garage and taking their hose to go hose yourself down or get the water hose off of a thing to use it or something else is now a crime. And they're treating that as a theft of a crime, where back in our day, Larry, it wasn't a crime. It was a mischief or it was something of that nature. Obviously, if somebody's doing something seriously and harming somebody, and I'm talking violent crimes, they need to be held accountable. Now, the age and the sentencing on that has to be really thought out and planned out, and it's too many factors just to talk about. It has to be upbringing, what percentage do we think we can help this person to be rehabilitative? And when you say a person can't be rehabilitative, what do you do? Is it just throw the key away? Is that what society we have? Germany has one of the best prison systems in the world, and they have one of the lowest recidivism rates and crime rates. So, it's working what they're doing over there, and we need to model that part of it. So when it comes to age, and I'll go back to that age, we have to give kids and reevaluate what we consider serious crimes, what we consider a nonviolent. You get kids at 20 years old smoking pot. Obviously, that to me it's amazing, because you got 7 or 9 states that it's actually legal in, and then you get another state where they're going to arrest the person. So we are way off on this, and I think it's hurting so many people. And the more that is the case, the more you're going to have people not liking the criminal justice system, being against it, being against law enforcement, because here their friend in California is doing this and there's nothing happening. Obviously, I tell young people to move to California.
Well, at the same time, we have the elimination of mandatory minimum sentences in many cases for nonviolent drug offenders, and we also have this decriminalization, as you say, of marijuana. Put all of that together, what message are we trying to send?
Well, you're going to get some people say, we're sending a message that it's okay to do drugs or do pot or do something else. And I could get into this really deep with the science on it. Just don't start that, because young people start on alcohol before they start on anything, Larry. And that's a whole other topic, which if we'd like to address, we can. We're telling people that we're going to be more human. I look at the crime and I look at what it is and what was it, a mischief crime, or was it a stupidity crime, or was it a real malice? Was it really done with intent to hurt and harm? And in those cases, obviously you have to have penalties. Obviously, I'm not some liberal that says that people need to. I'm quite the opposite. I'm a very middle-of-the-road man, Larry, and I believe we need to be held accountable like I was. But we don't need to be so harsh that we're losing people. Not only are we losing people for the person, you put a kid in jail and you give him 10 years for something that really doesn't deserve 10 years. All you did was make a kid come out of jail at 30 years old, a hardened criminal with nowhere to go, and now you might have a dangerous person. I'm here to save society or help society. And not only is it cost effective, we could be saving another person, because I don't want that kid getting out of prison who's very hateful and living next to somebody else, and when he does snap, he says, I'm not going back to prison, and he kills somebody. So now what did we do? Did we help that? Did we bring that on a little bit? I think society has to take a little bit more responsibility.
Well, you remind us, Larry, that 95% of those who are in prison ultimately are going to get out. We will talk about prison. We will talk about their getting out. But I want to go back to this unshackling of the judge's hands as it relates to this minimum sentencing. You think that's a good idea?
Well, when you say unshackling, I was never a big proponent, and in the federal system, they had the Book of Washington making the sentencing guidelines unconstitutional. We have a justice system or a judge system which we need to leave the judges judge people. They are voted in by the people, and I think maybe people need to start understanding about judges a little bit more, but we need to have them with that leeway to say, wait a minute, this case doesn't deserve 10 years. They had these 3 strikes, you're out, and the guy would rob a piece of pizza for his third crime, and he was getting 25 years in prison. I mean, you used to read about those. And that is wrong, and we're taking the human part of sentencing out. And I think, it was funny because when President Kennedy appointed 70 new federal judges when he became president in 1961, he actually said, you need to temper justice with mercy. And understanding that is very important. And so I'm a believer in giving the judges the leeway. Obviously, the argument on the other end is, well, you're going to get a corrupt judge because if they have money, they can pay him. And my son's going to do the same crime and not get the same treatment. Obviously, it has to be watched and looked at. I mean, we had that happen in Pennsylvania, right next to Connecticut, where we had a judge who was taking money for sentencing kids to prison.
I recall that story. Larry, let me take you back also to the notion of when can we detect that a kid is on the wrong path? And can we look at even truancy? Is that a good way for us? And do you think the truancy laws are playing into whether we're actually trying to get kids on the straight and narrow early enough?
What a best question I've received in a long time. I'm glad you answered it. And we didn't set it up, Larry. That was very good. You're exactly right. We're not worrying about education as much as we are. We need to, then we should. Truancy is a big part of it. Not just truancy, Larry. I think we're missing the point in school systems alone. School systems need to not only educate, and I know everybody screams about the STEM, the science, technology, whatever that is, the math, the big 4 that they all worry about to compete with other nations.
Science, technology, engineering, mathematics, STEM.
Right.
Yeah.
We're not teaching our kids how to be human beings. We're not teaching a kid this about respect and people say, oh, that has to be done at home. Well, if they don't have a home, or if they have one person at home who's messed up, what are we just going to say? Forget it? Then they're out of the system? They're in a school for 7 hours a day. They need to be taught other things except for the main core product things. And obviously, the more we teach them, and I go back to drug education. Schools have taken the drug education out of the systems, Larry. When you and I grew up, we used to see a brain and an egg next to it, and they would show this is your brain on drugs, and it'd be a frying egg. They don't do any of that in any schools anymore, Larry. What they've done is they've taken it away, and who's teaching those younger people about drugs? The older drug addict or the older drug dealer, the 18-year-old who's selling it to the 15-year-old. So we are taking away a part of the community for numbers reasons. And I am totally against that. and I think teachers and our school systems are our front lines of our youth today. And we're losing a whole generation, or we've lost a generation by doing that. And we need the school systems to not only track kids, find out if they're not even getting fed at home. It can go on and on and on, and what is going on. Obviously, there are some great programs out there. I have friends who started a Feed the Kids on the Weekend program, a hunger project, give them food from school to bring home because they're not getting nutrition. There's a lot of things that obviously that's societal problems, but the school system and the truancy rate, you can't even name me one truant officer. I don't even know of a truant officer in South Florida, and I deal with schools. They have what they call school resource officers, and they're there to maybe stop a school shooting or something of that nature, or on-site stuff. They're not a truant officer tracking down kids who don't go to school and holding parents accountable, because there has to be somebody held accountable if a kid doesn't go to school. Obviously, we're not going to put a parent in jail if the kid cuts school, but if the parent is not caring and not doing a somewhat job, we have to start saying, where is this kid going to end up? And it's a great barometer, Larry, of is this kid going to be in prison? Because obviously the education, 30% of all people in prison, Larry, are functionally illiterate.
Interesting. And then we can get into even mental health issues once we get to the issue of prisons. But I've got to ask you one question about drug sentencing. We're talking about lowering it in certain cases, but if there's one place where folks might want harsher sentences as opposed to more compassion in the area of drugs, it's related to fentanyl trafficking, which is this highly addictive and deadly new mixture. What is your take on fentanyl and opioids in the context of some of the other concerns that have been raised about whether we're too harsh and we haven't medicalized the issue of drugs?
Well, that's a great question. Fentanyl, to let your audience know, fentanyl is what they cut heroin with, and it's deadly. A very small part of fentanyl will kill the person. It's not so much the opioid all the time. It's the fentanyl that will have serious overdoses. And obviously fentanyl is a drug that I don't even know how they get it. I mean, chemical companies and, where it's coming from. And I think the bigger picture could be down the line. First of all, in the drug business, they have marijuana as a Schedule I narcotic. That means they treat it the same as opiate. They treat it the same as heroin or cocaine, which makes no sense to me at all. So you're getting a kid who's not giving a crap. He's got two he says, it's a Schedule I. I'm going to do this instead of that. And I don't know how much they're doing that, but I can tell you this. The compassion we need with drugs is it's a definite addiction issue. It's a medical issue. It should be treated more as a medical issue. Obviously, if you're robbing somebody to supply your habit, you have to be held accountable. I'm not going to ever say that. But when you're held accountable, we need to have the drug programs in the prisons. We don't. And right now they'll have another. That's all given lip service as well. There's more drugs in prison than on the street, and that's sad. So, again, we can get back to why and how, which we will, but they need to have more compassion. Drugs, everybody knows a person who's a drug addict, Larry, and nobody wants to see that person thrown in prison like he's a common criminal. It is an addiction, and they do need help, and it is help. There are states and certain areas that are doing a lot better job than other areas that will invest in the community, invest in that. And again, there is money out there, and they can just get it by stopping buying tanks instead of, for police agencies and all of this stuff and new stuff. They want more stuff. They want, a license plate readers, that cost X amount of thousands of dollars for cars. For what? I don't get it. I don't get why they need such high technology with that when a police officer is supposed to be your neighbor and trying to help you and stopping a robbery or maybe catching somebody who did a robbery. But we're not. I mean, we're out looking for people to get, and that is where we're missing the boat. One, with law enforcement, with two, with society and drugs. Our drug problems are our nation's problem right now. That is one of our serious problems. That
absolutely. Larry Lawton is with us here on America Trends. He's the co-author of the book Gangster Redemption. He served in our prison system and has told us his story and the program that he has developed. We're talking about trends in the criminal justice system with him. Larry, one of the other trends, and I wanted to get your take on this, in many states, including the one that I live in, they are talking about early release programs and how people earn these credits to get out. Oftentimes these are violent offenders, and yet there is this sense that there is a way to judge who is more likely to be a recidivist than who is not. Do you think we do a good job of that?
Well, I don't know how your state works, Larry. I do know that they need what they call game time, it's called, in most prisons, and it is called serving good time or game time, however you want to classify it. And what is a violent crime is really got to be determined. A violent crime sometimes could be a robbery, and they'll consider that a violent crime if somebody fell down. Oh, he committed a violent crime or something of that nature. I think every case is a case-by-case basis, or it should be. There are, serious violent crimes, and there might be a pattern, and you can see what the person has done to rehabilitate himself. Because here's what happens in prison, Larry. You get a person who goes to prison, and for the first 3 years, they're really rehabilitative. After that, a lot of bitterness sets in. They see a person who raped somebody get out, and they're still in prison, and they did a robbery. And then all of a sudden, now you have a person who's getting bitter and bitter and bitter, and then might get caught up in drugs in the system, might get caught up in a lot of illegal activities in the system, instead of rehabilitating him and getting him out. Obviously, again, there's a lot more. Let's just take the Michael Vick situation with the dogs. I don't believe he should have went to prison. I think he could have did a lot more, kept his job, or I know he went back to work, but he could have paid millions of dollars to a humane society. He could have did more of that and been held accountable in a different way. I think we need to be more creative with sentences, and I think the game time in most states is for that. Now, that puts a little bit more onus on probation departments and what they call pretrial and post-trial researchers. They actually look at the person, what programs they've taken. I pretty much am good at this because I was in the system, and I can tell if a person is BSing me if he did a certain program. And that's what I testify in trials right now, Larry. If a person is trying to get out of prison and they need an expert witness, I'm going to find out if he did a program just for the looks of it, or if he did a program because it meant nothing at the time, because I know the level of prison he was in, what he did, and a lot of other things like that. So I do believe game time is needed. I do understand a person, because it's tough to tell a person, you were robbed, or obviously rapes, there's a big difference there in my mind. I think there's a big difference, obviously, in murder, and it depends on the murder, obviously. But, you're talking about somebody's life, and there's another victim as well. But if that guy's getting out in 25 years, and he can get out and be rehabilitated, well, you could save the state money, and he's rehabilitated anyway. Look at Germany. I really implore your audience to go to 60 Minutes or go to YouTube and type in 60 Minutes German prisons, and you will see a great piece on what they do there, even with murderers, and how they treat them in the prison system, which is very important, because they're not making the people hard. They're actually rehabilitating the people.
Larry, I want to get your take. We're talking about letting people out of prison early, and we are going to go inside the prison system, and you certainly have knowledge of that firsthand. But I want to take you to the fact that in many states there are formulas to help make bail decisions. And bail, of course, is meant to protect public safety and to make sure that people show up for court using what they call the least restrictive manner possible. And oftentimes they have a point value system, factors like marital status, employment, previous failures to appear in court. How effective is that? Because bail reform is also on the agenda as it relates to our criminal justice system.
I talk about bail all the time. And, when you're talking about you can go into prison, you can make an armed robbery, and there's a set number of, bail amount right off the bat. If a person can make that bail, he gets it. And then you have a person who violated probation and can't get on buying a pizza out of county, and he can't get bail. Yes, bail reform is needed. And with bail reform, I'll tell you how it has to work. the higher the bail. If I was in the system of, let's just say, the state of Connecticut, and they had a Pablo Escobar kind of guy, a foreigner, I would give him a $20 million bail and hope he made it, because you would never see him again, Larry. He would get that bail and he would run. And you know what? He's not in our prison system. He's never coming back to this country. And what did you do? You just let a drug dealer get out of the country, and you made $20-30 million. I know it sounds, oh, that's not a business, is not what we should do. What are we doing anyway? We're keeping him in jail. We're going to incarcerate him for the next life sentence, if that's what it's going to be. And we're going to pay the cost of that right down the line to do what? You know, prisons are supposed to be for rehabilitation. They are supposed to be. When our founding fathers have set up prisons, it was to keep the harshest of harsh and to rehabilitate bad behavior. And the word rehabilitative was in there. So you want to look at what bail reform should be. We need to understand that, one, protecting of the society. There's two ways a person doesn't get bail. If you're a danger to the community or you're a flight risk. Now, again, on the flight risk end of it, I disagree on that one, because you could always put a number high enough, and if they make it, you know, if it's not a nonviolent crime or a drug crime or something like that, Larry, hey, this is what it want to do it, leave. We'll catch you again. If not, you're out of this county, or you're out of the state, you're out of the country, and we're never going to see you again. So that's one way to do it. But obviously, the number one thing is, are you a threat to the community? And when you take a person who is a drug dealer or something, are they really a threat to the community? I mean, they're a drug dealer. I mean, if you want to say the crime of drugs is a violent crime, because some places actually qualify drugs as a violent crime. You know, selling X amount of drugs is a violent crime. And I don't get that part of it, because then just make the crime it and make it no bonds anywhere, and then just let the jails fill up again where we're done.
Well, Larry, we're talking in this whole criminal justice reform realm, we keep hearing the term second chance society. And I'd love to get your definition of what that means. And in that context, what kind of reentry programs should we be looking at? And are there some that are trending in America today that you would recommend?
Absolutely. Second chance would be somebody, I would assume, like myself, getting out of prison after doing over a decade. I did over 11 years in prison, and I got out of prison. And do I have a second chance? A part of it I do, and a part of it I don't. I still, to this day, Larry, I can't get a job in a school, in a hospital, in a government building. I can't even be a truck driver that travels around the state, you know, with maybe gasoline, because it's a restrictive product. So that is wrong, and that, I think, is what's happened. That has made it a non-second chance. I think that's what you're talking about when they have some initiatives to make it a second chance society, by not having being so penalized with a record. And I think that's important, because once you do your time, you should have the opportunity to truly help yourself. And as I was on a show with the lieutenant governor of this state in Florida, and we talked about that, you know, if we can keep a person out of prison and with a second chance, we not only save that human being, we also he's now a productive member of society, paying taxes, renting a apartment, buying groceries. He's supporting a community with work, with viable work. And once you do that, the big part, I think, and the big push I'm hearing all over the country is change of the rules of having to report that you're a felon on a application. Obviously, I think it goes even deeper than that. I think a lot of the young people get arrested for BS, in my mind, and cops could not arrest them, because once you are arrested, Larry, whether you're convicted or not, I can look it up on a computer. And if I own a business and I Google your name and you come up that you were arrested for pot, even if you win it or it's dismissed, I'm going to look at, he beat it on a technicality.
Right, and if we go beyond these ban-the-box notions on an application, what is it that somebody has to be provided once they get out of prison to ensure that they are actually going to be able to find their way back into a meaningful situation in society? Is it job training? Is it some kind of supportive services? What is it that we have to have in place if we are going to look for this second chance opportunity?
Well, Larry, I'm actually working on a product called it's called a new way to a new life, reducing recidivism program, and it has to do with all of those things. It has to do with the person, like a halfway house. Has to do with maybe a faith-based organization, if that's the person's faith-based. It has to do with the family as well, the people he might come out and have support with, and obviously it has to do with that individual. And what it has to do is, Larry, if I told you right now a relative of yours is coming to your house and he just got out of prison, you wouldn't know what to do. You wouldn't know how to treat him. You wouldn't know how to help him gain his self-esteem back, I'll give you one incident. You might have a young person, let's say a cousin of yours gets out of prison, he's staying with you, and you want to help him because you have a heart, and you grab the remote control and say, hey, let me show you the show that you want to watch because it's really good. It's a rehabilitator. In his mind, he's looking at you like, look, you're trying to control me. I'm an idiot. You just take the controller away from me because that was just done to him for X amount of years. You don't know that you might have, the way you might open up a conversation, say, hi, Johnny, there's a great show. Maybe check it out here. If you want me to show you how to use the controller, I will. But if you want, just play around with it and you'll figure it out. And, there's ways, because you wouldn't know what I just told you, that you actually were hurting that man by trying to help him. And that goes for every part of the organizations, Larry, the halfway houses that don't do enough to truly reintegrate a person. I was in a halfway house, Larry, when cell phones were pretty prevalent, just getting out, and they wouldn't even let you have a cell phone. The whole society had cell phones. I said, what are you trying to restrict? Are we trying to implement ways to help people get back into society, or are we just trying to hold them back and show them that they're stupider than everybody? We need to have the proper people give the proper training in the ways for a person. First, mentally, everybody says, let's just put more money into housing, more money into job training, and they're okay. Larry, they'll mess that up in 2 seconds because they're not ready for it mentally. And when I say mentally, here I am, an educated man, got my degree, high IQ, and I was institutionalized when I got out of prison, Larry. I couldn't buy a cup of coffee. I could not buy a cup of coffee because I was institutionalized, because the average inmate makes 100 choices a day. The average person today, Larry, you and I, will make 1,500 choices today. You will get up, you will figure out what you want to wear, you'll put a tie, you'll have coffee, you'll put something else. You don't want eggs, you'll have English muffin. Whatever it's going to be, you're going to make approximately 1,500 choices. The average inmate makes 100. When you take that inmate and you throw him into society without the proper mental training, there's no way he can make it. I am lucky that I had a cousin who is, to this day, my dearest love, she's a cousin who's a psychologist, and expressed to me, if I didn't make a phone call from a bus stop that I was at, she said, Larry, you're having sensory overload. And I was literally a vegetable, Larry. I went on a bus and I couldn't eat for 20 hours. And then I wasn't comfortable until I got confined again into a halfway house. So I think what has happened is we're getting past the basics of literally helping a guy. The prison system literally programs a person. That's how they control people. They program them. You get up the same time, you eat the same time. They're programmed to follow these things. And I get why they do it, but they're programmed. Now you just throw a person out and say, okay, here, go to the halfway house, they'll figure it out, which they're not even ready, because one, they're done on a bid basis, and those people they just want the cheapest bid. Again, they're not looking at how good they are and what they do. I think too much is done on that.
Well, Larry, you have said to us that you think Attica, the famous prison uprising September 9, 1971, when inmates took control of a prison for 4 days, is going to happen again. You've talked about some of the terrible practices that go on within prisons. We're seeing that one of the reforms that a lot of people are seeking is the one about solitary confinement. And that's something that you can tell us more about, too. What are the practices inside that have got to be reformed?
Well, I'll tell you from a personal standpoint, I spent 3 years in solitary confinement, 11 straight months out of my time. And I spent that time because I was fighting the system. Not that I did crimes in there, I didn't do something. I was fighting, I was writing media outlets, I was using the pen to expose deaths and things that happen in the prison system. So I know a thing or two about, and I can tell you the laws on solitary confinement back then, and they do need to be changed. They had all of these regulations that said a person who's in solitary confinement has to be brought out of the cell every 30 days and reevaluated and stuff of that nature, and they never did that once, Larry. They would come to your door and say, "You okay?" And you cursed them out already. You're half crazy. Get the F out of here. You know what I mean? Get away from me. You're literally going crazy. Solitary confinement is one of the most cruel and unusual punishments I think there is. Obviously, there's a tool for everything. And there is incidents that I can totally see it and understand it. So I could say that from a person who was on the inside. But I think they use it too liberally. I think they use it just to shut people up. I think their training is terrible on that. And we can get into why guards are paid very little and they have no training and they're in a violent environment, so I feel bad for them as well. So I think you're throwing a person into a situation that's what they call a no-win situation. And I do believe the whole prison system needs to revamp, and I can fix it.
Well, you say that prisoner abuse is out of control, conditions are deplorable. It's really that simple, whether it's in the workplace, home, or prison. If you treat a person like an animal, they will become an animal. So how can we suggest that prisons are there to rehabilitate? Do we have to get back to that? Is that the movement within the criminal justice system? Do you see any glimmer of hope that prisons are going to be more than just containment centers?
Sadly, I don't. Right now, I don't see it. I do think there's going to be another Attica. They just had something not long ago in one of the prisons, I think in Baltimore, where they took over for a few days or something of that nature. I think it's going to be happening more and more because of the conditions of prisons, and I don't see it. And here's why. You don't have a very sympathetic voice for a bunch of criminals. There are deplorables, if you want to call them whatever you want, in the prison system, and there are there, sadly, and there are a lot of good people in the prison system as well, Larry, and I consider myself a good person who made some bad choices, but look at the lives I saved today, and I wouldn't be doing that if I didn't change. And what happens, though, Larry, is we're at such a bad time that nobody wants to put the money towards changing that system. And the system, I feel the system is so broke it needs almost revamped from the ground floor up. You can't just take a person and say, okay, he's going to change it. I think you need a person like myself or somebody who really knows. You can't take anybody who's never been in the prison system, put them in charge and say, you got it. If that person doesn't have me as his left arm, because I should be his left arm, because there's only one way he will know what's truly going on in that prison. Because not one of those prisoners is going to talk to somebody who's not part of, who understands what was going on, can speak the language of it, and do it. So you could take all the people you want, get all these great guys, and you know what, Larry? I could do a 10 times better job at them. Do I have that degree that he might have? No, I have a degree that counts, a degree from inside and an outside. Obviously, Larry, we don't want, what they call it, the gorillas run in the cage or something of that nature they call it. I get that part of it, but we have to go away. If we truly want change, we have to start doing things that are innovative. You keep doing the same thing over and over and you're going to get the same answer. And that's what has happened at that time. It's a sign of insanity. We need to change. Well,
it's gotten even worse, I would imagine, because we used to have places where there were institutions for those who were mentally ill. Today, we're using the jails and the prisons for those who are mentally ill. What has that added to the mix?
That's a big thing, and that's really hard on the guards and the administrative staff of a prison. I saw some stuff, Larry, that I'm getting the chills sitting right here in my chair. I really am. I watch guys take feces and eat their own feces and draw pictures on the walls and go crazy. And they're really mental people. And there's no way they belonged in that prison. They belonged in a criminally, mentally insane institution, if that's what you want to have. But they're not, and the staff there is not trained to handle them. I watched the staff beat a man half to death, and he was a totally mental man. Totally mental. It made me cry so much because I was hearing a man scream, knowing what he did, even what he did, threw feces on these officers, and he was a mental. I used to listen to him at night, and he would be talking demonic. He was a really mental inmate. He would be screaming at 2 a.m. about demons. This man was a total mental case. And he ended up doing something, and they beat him so bad, I'm hearing his bones crack. It breaks my heart because you can't, put the people there. They snap themselves. They literally snap themselves. And now you have mental people handling mental people, if you want to call it that, Larry. So we need to separate the mental. There are people who need to be rehabilitated, and there are people who need to be incarcerated, and there are people who need mental help. Let's figure out who needs what and give them. We are the richest country in the world, but we are one of the worst prison systems in the free world. And that is sad because we don't want to put the money and the effort and the compassion about changing the system. And, Larry, it kind of hurts me when this country, and I love the United States, talks about human rights of other countries, and then we do this to our own people. So,
I've got to ask you this question. We don't have a lot more time, but there are two things.
I know, it goes so quick.
No, it really does. We've been talking for about 50 minutes, but bullying and child abuse. When I hear those terms, I think about how many people have been damaged throughout the course of their young lifetime and the impact that has had. How common are those characteristics or those incidents in the lives of people who ultimately go down the wrong road?
That it's mainly, I would say, every one of them. I was abused, bullied, or either the bully or the bullied person abused. A lot of bullies were abused because that's a way to act out. Our whole system is full of that. We need to catch that early and quickly, and it's still very rampant because I hear from parents all the time. Oh, the principal don't want to hear her about it. It's not that bad. Well, when a kid is home crying and shaking from being abused, whether it's online or actually in person, it's serious enough. That's the end of the story. Because I have now a grandson, Larry, and if he is abused, I will, go to that principal. I'll show him what being bullied is about. Because that's the problem. They're either overwhelmed or they're out of their job. We don't have enough evaluation for the people that don't have a voice. And that is what scares me with the prison system and why I don't think you're going to see the change. I hope Donald Trump makes some changes he says he'll make. I don't know if he will, and I really hope he does. But when you don't have a voice, whether it's through voting or people even caring, forget it. I hear it so many times. He's just an inmate. Forget him. We treat them too good anyway. That is such BS. And the general public has no clue what goes on in prisons. I speak to guards today. Guards have one of the highest suicide rates because they see so much bad going on. A lot of them quit, and they can't handle it. And I can bring guards on your show anytime, and they'll tell you what goes on in there and the abuses they have seen, and they had to quit because they're in such a bad place.
Okay, I just want to ask one more question, Larry, and we're looking at the future, and that's what this podcast is all about. We're looking at things like rapid DNA analysis, facial recognition technology, other forensic tools for speedier, more certain justice. How important are these tools as we go forward to make certain that there is more certainty in terms of who we are picking out of the crowd to say that they might have been involved in a crime?
That's an important part of it. Obviously, DNA and stuff has exonerated a lot of people, but I don't want us to get hooked up because it seems like everything we're doing with these traffic readers and everything else is to get our community. We need to come back to the old way where a neighborhood or a community was a community. Do I want to be positive? Yes. I think we never should put somebody to death, or I don't believe in the death penalty, but we shouldn't even put people to death or incarcerate unless you're 100% certain of certain things. And with technology, you should have that. It's proven that facial recognition by a witness is off most of the time. So we need the technology that way, but we better get away from just thinking technology is going to save everything. Because for every technology advance we make, we also are hurting people by not only incarcerating people more, Think about the technology, Larry, if they had it back when you were a youngster and maybe did something wrong and they had something to get you and you're not at the position you are today. Are you a bad person? We should use the technology but not let the technology run our lives. So we need human people to make human decisions, and going even back to the judges need to have a heart, and they need to use their discretion when we can save a person. So it's a double-ended question. We need it, but we shouldn't be overwhelmed with it.
All right. I think that's a great response to that. Larry Lawton, how can people get involved in the Reality Check program or find out whether, in fact, you would be able to come and speak to a group? Give us all the particulars about reaching you, Larry Lawton.
Sure. Larry Lawton, my name is Larry, L-A-R-Y, Lawton, L-A-W-T-O-N. If you Google that, you'll find the Reality Check program. We can be reached at larry@realitycheckprogram.com or 327-2921. That's 321-327-2921. I speak at a lot of events for crime prevention. I speak at a lot of events for prisons, incarceration, and youth issues. I love it. A lot of stuff I do pro bono, obviously, if I can. Some people I just spoke in North Carolina for just for expenses, and because I wanted to help these kids, and we spoke to 400 kids at a school. So please just contact us. Obviously, contact Larry Rifkin. He knows how to get hold of me.
Absolutely. And Larry Lawton, I thank you so much. It's just wonderful to hear your perspectives on a whole range of issues as it relates to criminal justice. And again, I value all the information that you have shared today on America Trends. Thanks again, Larry.
Thank you for having me, Larry. Keep up the great work. I've been with you for years now, and you always have a compelling show. Keep it up.
Thank you so much.